I know there's a few of you that have worked in the home infusion area with home infusion, so you'll know that there are some things that are different than couriering for, say, the oral pill pharmacies, long-term care, and so on. Let me just give you a little bit of background about Emerita. We're home infusion. We consider ourselves specialty home infusion. Basically what that means is we provide services for the patients in the home, but we also deliver specialty drugs. That's kind of this new up-and-coming wave of drugs that are coming out, and they're highly expensive, and they really are kind of fragile, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that because there's going to be a lot of nuances that you as couriers will have to be familiar with. Why don't we go ahead and just get started and talk about home infusion. Home infusion is basically the administration at home of injectable drugs, either intravenously, like this woman here in the drawing is doing, or IM, like a regular shot, or subcutaneously. That means that the patients actually have tubing that goes like just under the skin, and that's how they infuse their meds. Patient can take the medication. The nice thing about home infusion really is that patients can take their medication in the convenience and comfort of their own home. You know, they're surrounded by friends and family, unlike the hospital setting where you're surrounded by just staffers. And then quite frankly, it's actually a very dangerous place to be because that's where all those superbugs, those infectious germs are really hanging out. So patients are better off being at home. Quite frankly, your dollars that are paying Medicare, Medicaid, don't go to paying for dietary to feed this patient or a bed to be occupied. You know, we're just paying for the medication. And so the patient is assuming all those other comforts, creature comforts of their home. So it is a very cost-effective modality to deliver health care. What are the medications? What are some of the things that we deliver? What is home infusion, basically? We deliver, these are the primary drugs. I don't know if you can see them listed. These are the primary list of drugs that we provide. TPN is a big one for us. That's total parenteral nutrition. And we have patients that can't eat, barely drink, quite frankly, so they get all of their nutrition through an IV line. And these are patients that might, through disease, maybe they've had to have their intestines resected out, or I've even seen some people who suffer gunshot wounds that just massively just ricochet around and mess up their intestines, or through trauma. So these people are on lifelong nutrition fed intravenously. We also provide IV antibiotics. IV antibiotics is one of those therapies. If you get injured and you have like an infection in your bone or deep in your tissues, you just can't hit it with oral antibiotics that you can get at your drugstore. You've actually got to take it intravenously. And it takes 6 to 8 weeks to administer some of these medications to get the full dose. Patients don't have to be in the hospital setting or in a long-term care setting getting their antibiotics. They can basically be discharged in 3 or 4 days. Once the physician has stabilized the patient, they're on an antibiotic regimen, patients can go home. And quite frankly, you know, we see probably, I think the majority of patients that are on service requiring antibiotics, more than 2 weeks, 100% of them now are getting therapy now in the home, where that was a much, much smaller number just 5 years ago. We also do cardiac drugs. And those are patients literally that, for congestive heart failure, that literally are, I'll call it sofa bound, because they can't even lie down because they've got so much fluid and edema that if they were to lie down, they would basically not be able to breathe because there's so much pressure on their lungs. What we've been able to do is provide this therapy in the home, and it basically makes the heart pump faster and harder, because otherwise these patients really can't get up. If they were to walk 10 feet, for example, they would be overly exerted and they'd be tired. You might even know some of these types of people, the CHF type patients. But by providing these IV cardiac drugs, it's pretty amazing. I had a patient, for example, in Denver just last year on with us, and she was in and out of the hospital like 4, 6 times over a 2-month period. The doctor said, hey, you guys have talked to me about this, what you guys can do with the cardiac drugs in the home setting, because I've never used it in the home, I only use it in the hospital. And he started the patient on it. And this woman, who quite frankly was in and out of the hospital, could not walk 10 feet. By the time she was on course of therapy for 1 month, she was already able to walk around and walk outside the house. By the second visit, we went back the second month. She had told us, she says, you know, my passion when I was a much younger woman was, I love to play golf, I love to get outside. And she says, you know what? And she was tearful. She says, I was able to actually get on a golf cart and ride with my husband out on the golf course. And I even was able to take a couple swings. I was able to chip and putt. It's meant the world to her. So it's really kind of cool, some of the therapies that we can provide, and it really makes a difference in the patient's life. Other things that you should be aware of, we also provide chemotherapy. And if we're providing chemotherapy, you guys should know the precautions of chemotherapy, because if there was a spill or an accident that occurred, you guys need to be equipped on how to handle it, and I'll have a slide later on to talk about that. And then there's specialty drugs. Specialty drugs is kind of this new name for what I just talked about earlier, these highly expensive drugs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but the key to remember is they are brittle. They are not real stable. That means when it's mixed and we call you, we got to get somebody out to the patient's house right away, because many of these drugs have stability for maybe 6-8 hours. That's it, from the time we mix it up in our pharmacies to the time the patient has to complete the dose. So we got to get it out pretty quickly, and so there'll be some special considerations just for those specialty drugs, and I'll talk about a little bit more about that in just a moment. I do want to talk about contracts, but the good thing is Keith took a lot of that fire, so I'm going to roll through a lot of this pretty quickly. Basically, we're all accredited. All of us in home infusion it's a highly regulated level of pharmacy practice, and we all have to be accredited. And part of the accreditation requires that we have service agreements with our couriers. So not just one sheet that says here's the fee schedule. You just call us and here's what you pay. It's got to be a little bit more robust. It has to have the duration of the contract. It has to also outline the responsibility of each organization. What our responsibility as a home infusion provider is, what your responsibilities are in terms of making those deliveries, communication, things like that. Of course, there's the fee schedule, and there also has to be written any applicable laws or regulations that would impact our doing services together. The thing that I don't need to speak about too much are the business associate agreements, because that's huge for us. But I will just simply emphasize this. As Keith alluded to, the fines are huge. So I am a covered entity. I'm that covered entity that he talked about. And we are frightened as hell about getting fined and sued. We're a relatively large infusion pharmacy, so we've got relatively deep pockets. And we can ill afford, though, we don't make large margins in our business, so we can ill afford to have $1.5 million in fines hit us in any one time. The thing I do want to emphasize, though, too, is that keep in mind, I know many of you guys subcontract services to other people or agencies to fulfill the order, and it's important that you guys have those business associate agreements. So I just can't emphasize that enough, that if you guys are subcontracting to another agency, that you guys have that in place, because I, as a covered entity, am relying on you guys to be compliant in that regard.
Richard, can you speak just for a minute? I've actually in my Courier service in Merita, and I know that with new patients, we've got a big packet of information that goes out, and there is a lot of PHI that's on that material.
Yep.
Can you speak briefly on what is on there, or is that coming up?
It will be coming up, but the fact of the matter is you guys will see a lot of information. You're going to go right to the patient's home, you're going to meet these folks, you're going to have documentation that we may require that you get signed when it gets delivered. It can be as simple as what we call a delivery ticket, and I will talk about that in a little bit. But as I talk about, there's kind of these value-added services that I look for in a courier, and that is you may be able to get signatures on other documents that are required. So we call them assignment of benefits, meaning that the patient allows us to bill their insurance company directly as opposed to billing them, and then they get reimbursed. There's also a consent to treat. They need to sign this consent agreement. If we don't get that back, legally, we shouldn't be treating the patient. So we may ask you guys to have the patient sign. If we do that, you will see a lot of information, and therefore, clearly and squarely, you'll be right in the midst of PHI, protected health information. So you really have to be closely guarded in terms of that information, because we treat a lot of different people, and we treat famous people as well that want to do these kinds of services at home, regardless whether they have insurance or not. So the fact that you've got this, I got to tell you, again, I'm scared about getting fined, because I have a lot of my business that I've kind of contracted out to different providers, not just couriers, but I contract out with nursing agencies, I contract out with other pharmacies to do some of my first dose compounding. So there's a lot of contractors that I have, so it makes me nervous. I got to make sure that everything's going right. Even if everything goes right, I'm still concerned about, are we offering the kind of quality level of care that I want to be associated with? So that's always something that we're evaluating as well. But I will address some of the PHI a little bit further as well. I'm going to breeze through a lot of this just simply because of time and because Keith did a much better job than I could do on this. Just keep in mind, the reason it's become a big issue for us is because effective January 2013 is when Health and Human Services basically said they're going to enforce this right down to the business associate, meaning you guys. So keep that in mind. It's very important. That's something that I'm emphasizing every time I talk with our couriers that we're contracting with. We already talked about a conduit, and you guys don't qualify, so I don't need to go into that. Talked about the $1.5 million of fines plus possible jail time. And for us, the most common breach is getting the delivery to the wrong address. And that, you think, whoops, I'll go correct this. Well, you know what? The problem is, because of HIPAA regulations, once that gets out, patient opens the box, they see that, oh, wait, this is for John Elway. I shouldn't have this, Oh, hey, guess what? I got the wrong package for John Elway. You want something like that. I never serviced John Elway, by the way. But the point is just being made. But that's one HIPAA infraction. But think about this. You deliver the package to the wrong patient and they take the dose.
Oh,
that's really scary. And I'll tell you, you might think, how can that be?
It's easy.
It's very easy, because our doses don't have blue and red pills on it, or they're not shaped a certain way. They come in an IV bag, and you can't tell because it's a clear solution whether this is your antibiotic or Mrs. Jones' antibiotic. So I have heard many horror stories. Thank goodness I haven't been associated with one in a long time. But I hear these stories all the time where patients get a delivery, it was sent to the wrong address, and a patient takes it. Many instances, it doesn't hurt the patient. But I would caution you, because it's intravenous medications, it could. Can you imagine if somebody hooked up like one of those cardiac meds that has no need for a cardiac drug? So you've got a normal, fully functioning heart, and you give them one of those drugs that a CHF patient needs that's going to make your heart do this, yeah, you will probably put that patient into deep weeds. And so it's really important that we really take care and take careful caution in terms of how we manage that. I want to talk about just some of the basics. And really, these are just expectations. Whenever we're looking at working with a courier service, we want to make sure that in your vehicle, that you separate the clean from the dirty. And basically what I call dirty are things that you're picking up from patients. It may be just a pump, it may just be whatever. Typically we're not picking up a lot of hazardous waste, but we could from time to time. But primarily it's just that kind of stuff, it's equipment. But you need to segregate that because it's considered dirty. You got to put it into a separate area. And here in one of our vans, I just took a snapshot, we have a separate tote where we put those kinds of things to bring back to the pharmacy so that everything else doesn't get commingled with that dirty item. So that's a requirement. That's an accreditation requirement for us, and that's something that as we contract with the courier services, we would want you to do that. Now, again, 9 times out of 10, you'll never do a pickup for us because most of the things that we send out today really don't require a pickup except for maybe a pump from time to time. Safeguard the packages. Medical supplies should generally not be carried in the bed of a pickup truck. I have had this happen to me not too long ago in El Paso, Texas, where a courier was driving something for us in a pickup truck, and we got a call from somebody not even close to the patient's neighborhood, and they found a package. And again, that could be a PHI issue, and it is a PHI issue, but there was information enough that they opened it up, they saw the medication, so this is really getting worse, but they did see that our name as a pharmacy was on it, and they called us to say, hey, there's a box that was kind of in the road near our house. So we were able to retrieve it. The awkward thing about that is that we didn't even get a call from the courier that delivered to that patient's house. They just said, okay, he didn't really count whether or not there should have been 1 box or 2.
Did he get fined?
You know what? I can't tell. I don't know. All I remember is I got the news after the fact, and I think our GM, who I know very well in El Paso, probably did make a big stink about it. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
She stands all of 4'10", but this little Latino woman takes no best from anybody. She does a great job. I'll tell you what, she was not too happy. I remember that, but I also was confident she was going to take care of that situation appropriately. And this is what we're talking about: protect confidentiality. We talk about it. Patients may have multiple boxes in their delivery. So when you as a professional courier are picking up those boxes for a patient, have your drivers do the due diligence up front. Make sure that they know how many packages are going to go to Mrs. Smith, how many packages are going to go to Mrs. Jones. So he or she is looking for that number of packages, is really carefully making sure that the label on the box matches the name of the person that you're making the delivery to. Seems simple enough, right? But I get back down to this bottom. Remember the fine of up to $1.5 million for a breach of confidentiality. It's just that simple, making a wrong delivery. Wrong delivery of auto parts, maybe no big deal, right? Wrong delivery of medications, big deal.
Yeah.
Communication, this should go without saying, but you know what? Unless you say it, it seems like it doesn't necessarily always get followed through. And that is, we realize that there's going to be traffic, there's going to be accidents that happen. For one reason or another, a delivery can get delayed. And quite frankly, one of the problems with our industry is we get what we call a lot of stat orders ourselves. So as a result, we're calling you and we're expecting something out there like in an hour, 2 hours, right? Which can be good for your business if you can staff that. But we do expect that if a delivery is going to be delayed, that there's communication. Either one, communication back to the pharmacy so we know, and two, communication to the family. Now, we can do it one of two ways. We do have couriers that call the family directly, which is great. We've got a great working relationship with them. Otherwise, we'll just tell them, hey, we'll call Mrs. Jones and tell her that you're running late. So just keep in mind, it's important. Remember I talked about drugs that have, maybe a 6 or 8 hour stability? The clock is still ticking. If we can't get into Mrs. Jones' veins literally in like 45 minutes, and it's a 7-hour infusion, we're not going to be done by the time the drug is going to lose its potency. So the drug doesn't lose its entire potency like that, but what happens is it degrades over time. And basically, the USP, our governing body in terms of pharmaceutical products, basically says that a drug is not potent if it loses more than 5% to 10% of its potency. So by that period of time, it's already lost more than 10% of its potency and would be deemed inappropriate for use. So again, communication is just real important with us, and just simply because the coordination that really goes on in terms of providing IV therapy. This also should be a basic, right? But I live in the year 2013 with all of you too, so I get some of the things that we deal with, and quite frankly, I know that finding presentable staff sometimes can be a challenge, and what's presentable in one person's eyes may not be in someone else's. You know what? We were just talking about Aaron Hernandez at lunch, and I don't know. He might make a good courier driver. Probably not today or in the future. But the guy's all tattooed up, and I got nothing against that. My daughters are have tattoos too. Not that I was willingly consenting to that. But the point is, kids are going to do that. And I realize that's kind of a standard of the American culture these days. But keep in mind, when you're delivering to that 70-year-old woman that's on IV antibiotics, her confidence is really inspired by the professionalism of your couriers. Mm-hmm. So if we see somebody come up to our office to pick something up in short cut-off jeans, in a midriff, we're just probably going to call you and say, hey, you know what, we need somebody else. We need Tom that came out yesterday, who was much better, much more professional. So we're not expecting somebody necessarily to go in khakis and polos. I know some of you guys have those kinds of uniforms, but we're looking for somebody that at least looks clean cut, and somebody that when they ring the doorbell and somebody looks at them through the peephole, they're going to open the door and let them in. This is another item too. I actually get comments from patients from time to time about the vehicle signage, and that is that patients at home don't want their neighbors to know that they're sick. Okay, so And it's fine. If it's professional looking, I don't think there's a concern. Sometimes you have like a red cross on there, or it may say something related to medical. That's fine, but keep it professional looking. Keep it reasonably discreet. You know, I just made a little funny comment there. You know, I deliver to sick people would probably be an example of something that would not be real appropriate and would not be something a patient would really appreciate when your van pulls up to their house. We talked about the timing of delivery. Again, more and more, many of the injectable pharmaceuticals really need to be delivered by a specific time. Again, I talked about the short stability, but oftentimes a doctor said, you know, the patient is coming out of a hospital, they're on a regimen where they have to get the dose every 8 hours. So they just got out of the hospital, they got a 12 noon dose, so they need their dose by 8 o'clock. So, you know, patients coming out of the hospital, we're working with the doctor, with the lab, with the home health agency to try to get things coordinated. By the time we actually get the drug mixed, it could be 5 o'clock, and we're having to call you and say, hey, we got to get this thing out. Can you get a driver here in 10 or 15 minutes, and can you get it to the patient's house by 7:30 so that they have it before the actual time dose? So those kinds of things happen a lot in home infusion. If we're dealing with hospice patients too, oftentimes you'll get a call right in the middle of the night, if you guys have a 24/7 service, that is. And because those patients, when, you know, these are terminally ill patients, when they start to really hit kind of the very last stages of their illness, their need for these pain management drugs skyrocket. And it can be, invariably, it's at 2 in the morning when the nurse calls you and says, hey, I need to get another dose out here. This patient's not going to last another 30 minutes on their current pain management dose. Trust me, with these patients, we want to keep them as comfortable as possible. The last thing we want them to do is go without that pain medication. It would be excruciating for those patients. So we take that extremely seriously, and our pharmacists will go in right away to get the product mixed, but we're also counting on a courier service that may be able to provide 24/7 accessibility to help us with that. Some of the reasons why we have stat deliveries. One, think about it, the medications that we infuse are going right in the veins. A lot of times the oral meds that you take, you know, they go through the gut, then they get filtered by the liver, and then just a little bit is left over. Not necessarily as big a deal. Certainly could be, but not necessarily. The IV drugs, when it's infused, immediate impact. It's going right where it needs to go or where it shouldn't go. It's immediate. So we are constantly evaluating lab work. So you know, we're evaluating that sometimes for antibiotic patients 2-3 times a week. So if the blood work is not within normal limits, we need to make sure that we're making the change now. So, you know, if you were on IV therapy or your mother was on IV therapy, if we went out and we drew the blood last night and we had it spun down and overnight they did the evaluation, we get the information to the doc. Doc is obviously in round, so he calls us in the afternoon. It could be 12 to 18 hours before we get a change order from the doc saying, hey, we need to do something different with this drug. So by then, you know, the patient may already have another 12 to 18 hours worth of that old drug, and we need to change it fast. So we're telling the nurse to stop the infusion, we're going to mix a new bag, and we're going to start it right away. So those kinds of things just happen like that here. And think about it, we're actually much like a hospital without walls, because we're doing this IV therapy. We're still working with labs, we're working with nurses. It's just that we're not all in one center. So we really count on the courier services to really help us bring everything together.
Do you see that being a new or more broader? Because the whole home healthcare stuff is that they want to keep people home more. Do you see more of this activity becoming more and more?
You know what? And I'll tell you why. For a long time, or forever, Medicare really has been reluctant to pay for intravenous services in the home. There are some plans, the Medicare Part D plans, that now cover all prescription drugs, but there still is a fair amount that the patient has to pay in order to get Part D home infusion drugs. There is some legislative efforts to allow for Medicare patients to get the same benefits as all commercial payer patients get, and that is they should be able to get their antibiotic therapy at home. They should be able to get some of these other therapies at home, not with all these, it's encumbered with restrictions. The minute that changes, the amount of patients that are on IV therapy will probably triple or quadruple. So I will tell you, yeah, home care will just explode. Because right now, the only alternative for these patients is they either, one, they stay in the hospital, or two, they get kicked over to a long-term care center, skilled nursing facility. So once the home care benefit comes through Medicare, when it comes through Medicare, and I think it eventually will because it is the lowest cost opportunity, then I think there's going to be an explosion and a shift even more so into the home setting. So I think that just benefits all of us in the future because our business will go up and we'll certainly be counting on you guys as well. Hazardous drugs. I talked about chemotherapy. Not all pharmacies do chemotherapy. It's still largely done by a lot of the physicians, the oncologists. But there are a lot of oncologists that, you know, quite frankly, don't want to do it anymore. The money isn't in it anymore that 10 years, 20 years ago, physicians were constantly doing because the reimbursement was great for them in terms of what the insurance company would pay. Now the insurance company is basically paying them near cost. Some of these drugs cost thousands of dollars. So the docs don't want to keep something on their shelf that they've already paid for, only to get a $100 profit on it. So they're looking to kick that back to home infusion, meaning that we're going to kick this back to you guys to courier out to the patient. And what needs to happen is that if you're going to carry chemotherapy for a pharmacy, one, you should know about it, and you should be given proper training, and you should be given what we'll call a chemo spill kit. And I have a picture of that, but it's really important because this is, let's face it, these drugs are killing cells. When you put it into a patient, it's killing those rapidly dividing cancer cells. So, you know, you touch that stuff, it gets handled inappropriately, and it can really hurt anybody. It could hurt a driver. And so we want to make sure that appropriate precautions are taken.
Are you talking about nuclear medicine in that situation?
I'm not talking about nuclear, and I know you've got a nuclear person that's handling nuclear transport.
Right.
Quite frankly, I don't know much about that, to be quite honest with you, other than
I'm wondering what the difference is, between chemotherapy, because I thought that was part of the nuclear med.
To some extent, but nuclear, because it's radioactive,
Right.
That's to me a whole different ballgame.
Okay.
But chemotherapy I would treat much the same way, but the radioactive stuff, that's got to be transported, you know, even more securely than just the fact that it's in a bag. Chemo spill kits basically look like this. You can see the contents are pretty complex. So this is not something I would just give to Billy Joe and expect him, hey, I got something leaking here, and he can figure out what to do with it, right? So we need to make sure that if a pharmacy is expecting you to courier chemotherapy, one, it's incumbent on them to come to you and say, this is what I'm going to need. I need to train your drivers. So they should do that. That's a requirement of theirs. But it's certainly something that you can ask them about. If you're doing more home infusion, you might just say, hey, by the way, you might do this as you're asking them about a business associate agreement. Hey, just want to know, are we couriering any chemotherapy for you guys? Because I understand we should have some spill kits and training. So keep that in mind.
It's very still with blood. Those spill kits are slightly different than the biohazard spill kits.
Yeah.
I noticed the green Z right away. That's got to be a different compound to absorb it.
Yeah.
But you said it's highly caustic. If they touch it, it could actually be much more damaging than maybe.
It can be, because again, what's going to happen is that it's going to basically stop cell division. So skin on your hands, you're going to start sloughing off, things like that.
Oh my gosh.
Gentlemen, sorry to see you. Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen.
So yeah, that's why this has gloves. You're not going to, hopefully have not come in contact with the chemo. You'll just see maybe it's leaking out of a box or something like that. Who knows? But whatever the circumstance is, this kit has appropriate double-strength gloves, for example. It has good barriers that will protect the employee, and it also has things that will draw up the spilled solution. So it's really important that you have that if you're couriering chemotherapy.
Do you provide that to your courier, or is it the courier's obligation to?
We provide it. We personally provide it. And I would expect most reputable home infusion companies will provide that to you as well. But, you know, there is no law or regulation that says they have to, so it'll be up to the individual pharmacy.
I got a quick question on the
course.
chemo drugs that's transported.
Yeah.
Wouldn't they put maybe an extra level or two of packaging?
They do.
For the chemo drug?
Yes, and most of the pharmacies will do that. They usually use we put the drug into what looks like a Ziploc baggie, but in the case of chemotherapy, we typically put double bag it, and it goes into a very, very strong Ziploc bag that's like, I don't know, 12 mils thick. So it's a very thick bag, but still, anything can happen. Something can get punctured, there can be an accident or something that results in the need to deal with this.
It can be stolen, and the person that steals it, people steal things not knowing what they're dealing with, and there's no accounting for it.
I've actually, I've been in this industry for, gosh, 25 years, and I actually had a situation where somebody stole the van, and it had returned chemotherapy and biohazardous stuff, and this is back in the days when HIV, we did a lot of HIV home infusion. Now, a lot of HIV patients are on oral meds, so we don't see as many of them, but quite scary, even at that, because the risk to other public, as well as to the person that, you know, probably some innocent 16-year-old foolish kid, right? But, you know, he's running around with biohazardous stuff in that vehicle. Not good. But, yeah, so many reasons. We need to protect our employees, though, for sure. So the chemo spill kit should be something that the pharmacy provides to you. All right, I talked about specialty drugs, so I want to address this a little bit because a pharmacy will usually use a special fragile label on the box. And if they do, it's really important that the driver really looks at it and understands that, wow, I got to really handle this carefully. Because I've got some patients on these drugs, literally, it's $30,000 a dose. That's how expensive it is. It's one of those drugs that, again, is like that 8-hour stability drug, so we want to get it out there timely. But these are kind of designer drugs. This whole specialty class of drugs, all these really brilliant chemists can now put atoms and molecules together, and they make these enormous molecules now. And it's amazing what they can do. Because they've made these designer molecules, they can attach exactly to what they need to focus on, as opposed to just kind of hitting all kinds of cells and things that shouldn't be hit. So it's really specific, but the only problem is, because they make these large molecules, basically, you can imagine, if the solution gets shaken up too much, the thing starts to break. That's exactly what happens. So as a result, if that molecule breaks because it gets shaken up too much, then the therapy that the patient or the insurance company is paying $30,000 for, basically useless. Now, I will tell you, it's not like you have to carry it with kid gloves. It's not like that. But you know, I would tell you, if you're going over a lot of bumpy, rocky roads, everybody would want to know that. You would want to do something to really minimize the shaking. And for example, we bubble wrap it. We do a lot of packaging in peanuts. So internally, it should absorb some of that chalk as well. But you know, it's definitely not something you put in the bed of your truck and have that thing bouncing all over the place.
A lot of this goes UPS, doesn't it, also?
Not the specialty, I can pretty much
Okay, so this is real special.
Well, yeah, not if it has an
I will tell you, it should be the rare instance that you guys would carry it. Because these things are so expensive, I can tell you how we handle it. We basically want the patient to come to our office and we'll infuse it there. Because quite frankly, we want to see their derriere in the chair, you know, willing to take the med before we open up a $30,000 vial of medication and fix it up.
Yeah.
We don't, you know, this happens, as you guys well know. You make a delivery and you expect the patient to be home and they're not. It's the last thing I want to find out if I mix a $30,000 drug.
Well, and I imagine there's no way to know if the molecule's been broken.
There really isn't.
Anyway.
Or you contract a courier to deliver something like this to a remote area, and they damage it. Willful negligence, the driver's something happens and it's destroyed. Would you go after the courier companies for reimbursement for that, or how would you do that? Do you eat the cost?
You know what? That's a good question, because I've had it. It happens. You know, I expect the courier company, the people, you all that I do business with, to deal with that employee. You know, it happens. Somebody does something stupid. I can tell you, just this week I had somebody do something stupid in one of my offices. We have an 800-pound hood, which is where we mix some of our therapy. And our tech thought, well, the bench is too low, so there's little pegs, just like you have on like an outdoor picnic table. You can kind of raise it and lower it. Well, he thought he and a buddy of his could lift up this hood and change the legs. Well, they couldn't, and this 800-pound hood came crashing. It actually hit a wall, thank God, because it would have smashed them. It would have hurt them seriously. So people do stupid things. I get that. And I don't typically go after them. I would, it's not been my practice, but I will tell you, you know, a guy that, a small proprietorship owner who just did that, definitely will probably take some kind of action. We don't, we would try to take certain precautions ourselves. We know there's going to be certain risks. We would do whatever we could to minimize that. And we would also, again, you hate to think about profiling, but we would size up the person. If they just seem like, wow, this is kind of a rambunctious kid who I don't know, I don't trust with this patient's medication, we'd probably call you guys and maybe ask for another driver. And you know, we realize it's tough to find good help, but you know, we might, in thinking, I always like to do this. If it's my mom that's on service, what would my mom do? If she saw somebody coming in and they just looked like that rambunctious, rowdy type person, I wouldn't want that kind of person delivering to my mom. So, and I do the same thing, just integrity-wise. If I wouldn't give that drug to my mom, then I'm going to tell people it doesn't go out, because that's somebody's mom or somebody's dad or brother. I'm not going to do it, because again, there's just too much risk in this business. So that's the specialty side. Proof of delivery is an area that's really important for us, because the payers, basically Medicare, Medicaid, Aetna's, and Blue Cross, basically require that if you want to get paid, you have to have proof of delivery. Now, they will pay us, and they're not going to ask for the copies of the signed delivery tickets to come back to them, but they will do periodic audits. And if they audit us and they find out that we don't have a signature to prove that the patient was delivered medication, they'll recoup the payments.
How come the electronic signature is not good enough? Why do they want that paper?
I'll tell you what, electronic signature is now starting to gain favor. So if you have a service where you guys can get it on like a smartphone, and I actually have a slide on that, that actually works. It really, what's important is all the information that you guys can aggregate to provide to the pharmacy. So if you've got the signature, and then you also have the time that the product was delivered, and has all that information that's necessary, who signed for it, timing of it, the date of delivery, that will actually suffice.
Yeah?
It will.
Because I do work for Caremark, and they're always wanting the originals back.
You know what? If you can get the original, obviously that's a slam dunk. So that's a slam dunk. If you have the hard copy, and we do the same thing. Local deliveries, we ask for a patient to sign the delivery tickets. If we are doing, if we're shipping out overnight, it's actually acceptable to get the FedEx download or UPS download, and that suffices as proof of delivery. So working with courier services, if you have the handheld electronic signature and you can get a file to us that says, on this date I shipped and delivered to these people, and can confirm that, you know, this is the time it was delivered, that actually does suffice. There are a lot of, it's really, the regulations have actually probably been better tolerated or received than some of my colleagues in the industry. I think many of us are kind of dinosaurs, and we kind of like the old paper trail, so it's more of a personal preference, but the industry is definitely heading more towards electronic signature. The important thing on electronic signature too, and this happens a lot, you get, your driver gets the patient to sign, but the patient forgets to date it, and so the paperwork comes back, and then we either ask the courier, can you take this back out there? Because the patient actually, it's no good. I mean, we actually have to set up another document where the patient signs it and dates that, that they received it. Believe it or not, it's critical, and we just can't handwrite it in ourselves. So it's important on those documents where you've got a signature and a date line that it's filled out properly. Also, some of these documents will also have a line that says, if it's not the patient, you know, you can sign here, but you know, what is your relationship to the patient? So again, that has to be filled out too. So when you go through training and you get a contract with the home infusion pharmacy or specialty pharmacy, you know, make sure that you do get trained in terms of what they want, because the last thing you want to do is waste your time. You know, obviously they should pay you, but still it's a waste of time to go back out and just get a date on a document. Additional documents, I touched on this already. Things that we would like to have, and if we're really working well as partners, I would probably have you go out and get other paperwork signed as well for me, not just the delivery, but I might have some documents that might require the patient to sign over their insurance so that we can bill the insurance directly. That's the assignment of benefit. The consent to treat form, if I can have you guys get you guys to sign that up front, that really makes my life a lot easier. Oftentimes we'll work with home health agencies or nurses to go out and get these documents signed, but if I can count on the courier to do it, that really makes it easy because I can give you these forms at the time that you're taking the delivery out to the patient for the first time. So, and that's something I can train you guys on too. But these are important because you can't have just anybody sign these documents. It either one has to be the patient, or it has to be someone that has power of attorney or is the legal guardian. So that's why this, they're not readily going to hand this over to you just to say, hey, get it signed, because delivery ticket can be signed by a sister, it can actually be signed by a neighbor, for that matter. But these items actually have to be signed by the patient, and that's why it becomes a little bit more critical. Because again, if the patient says, well, I never saw a consent to treat, and then you come back with a document that was signed by the neighbor, for example, that's not going to hold up in court, and we're going to get busted for it. So we do try to check those documents when they come back, but it's critical that the appropriate person sign those. Okay.
And typically the ALB goes out, and the consent to treat is usually out in the initial package on the patient.
Yep. And usually we call them startup packages, and there's actually quite a few more documents than this. There's a lot of things that we would ask the patient to sign, and that's something where you guys could be of benefit, value added to us if you guys would take care of that for us. But yeah, these are probably two of the most critical items, because legally we shouldn't be touching the patient if we don't have consent to treat. And legally we shouldn't be billing the insurance company if the patient hasn't allowed us to take assignment. So those are critical for us. The other documents are acknowledging, you received this, you received that, those kinds of things, but this is critical for us. Okay? Okay, just what are some of the customer service attributes that we look for in pharmacy from our courier service? One, if you want to continue to do business, we want to know that when we call you, somebody's going to be there to answer the phone promptly. Otherwise, we're just going to go to some other XYZ courier service. I indicated that a lot of our deliveries in this industry tend to be of the staff or rush nature, so basically things that have to be there within 2 hours or 3 hours, or maybe even quicker than that, quite frankly. So services that can provide that certainly become more valuable to us. We certainly understand that we expect there's going to be higher fees associated with it, but when push comes to shove and we got to get a medication out there right away, we just want to know somebody can do it. When we ship products out, if we have a time delivery, we like to know that you guys meet your deadlines consistently. Most of the time, if we can get things ready in the morning, we give you all day to deliver it. You guys can deliver it in the afternoon, and we know it'll be delivered during business hours, typically. But even on rushes or certain, higher need deadlines, we like to know that at least you're pretty consistent. We can count on you. Yeah, if we say 2 hours, yeah, you know what? These guys get it there in 2 hours. It's not 4 hours. We're not missing it by a long shot. If you miss it by a couple minutes, that's not critical for us. But if you miss it by an hour, sometimes that is critical for us. And then communication. We really need, that's the bond in business, right? You got to be able to communicate with one another. So being able to communicate with the pharmacy, a medical provider, promptly if something's delayed or if there's a problem during the delivery is key for us. Because then we can start reacting. If we need to just compound another dose and get it out, then we can start that process sooner if you guys are communicating with us as quickly as possible that you see a problem arising. So that's important to us. What's important to the patient that you're delivering to? One, the professional appearance. I can't overstate that enough. Of course, being polite and courteous, because the thing about the patients, particularly the patients that are just coming on service, think about it. They've been in the hospital, they have been told, you're going to go home on IV therapy. These guys are not clinicians, they're lay people, you know? They're accountants, they're courier drivers, they're, you know, you name it. They're not medical people. So they're real nervous and anxious about going home and trying to figure out, how am I going to get this drug into my body and do it safely, right? So we go through a lot of training, but patients are going to be antsy, they're going to be anxious, they're going to, you know, you're not probably going to meet the nicest people on those first deliveries. So being polite and courteous and understanding their situation and being compassionate about it is going to be important. Again, calling the patients, whether it's you or whether it's us, somebody needs to communicate to the patient that, you know what, we told you we'd be there at 6, we're stuck in traffic, this is what happened. Realistically, our next, we believe we'll get it there by, instead of 6, we'll get it there by 6:30. So at least give them realistic time expectations so they're not getting antsy about it. Because the last thing that what will happen is they're already nervous, it's 6:05 and they think they're not going to get delivered. And they're going to start raising Cain. And they're going to, you know, first call is going to be to the hospital. You know, you set me up with this and nobody's coming and it was supposed to be here by 6. So that becomes a problem. So communicating that there's going to be a delay before that deadline hits, much better. So that's what we need to do. Oftentimes, the pharmacy, we're not Walgreens. We're not one of these pharmacies where patients come walking into our store. We rarely see our patients. We talk to them every day on the phone, but we couldn't tell you Mrs. Jones from Adam because we never see them. You guys are the face of the pharmacy, really, because you make the delivery. They see the courier drivers, you know, every week, every couple of days. They never see our pharmacists. They never see our technicians or our billers, people like that. So, again, it's important that you guys have that professional demeanor that, and you're perceived to, you'll give that perception of a quality service. Again, that's why that professional appearance is so important, because you guys are the only ones they see, to be honest with you, from our pharmacy.
A lot of times you have nurses waiting too to administer
That's right.
things. And I had a customer that lived way out in the boonies by where I live, so I continually would deliver to them. They always wanted me to stay for dinner. They wanted me to do this, wanted me to do that, but because of the location of it. But so many times there's a nurse that's waiting to administer it, and that's where you get into problems and the delays.
Yep.
Nurses can be nasty in that situation. I've experienced it.
Well, and you know what? That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't put it on my slide, but you're right. Many of these nurses have, you know, they're there at 6 o'clock. Where's the drug? I got to infuse it at 6 because I got to be at, you know, some other patient's house at 8 o'clock to do theirs. So they are already scheduled with what their afternoon and evening looks like. So it's really important that it's not just for patient meeting the dose. You're right. It's for support personnel, because if that nurse can't get the drug infused, then this next subsequent patient is going to be delayed and so on. So she may just say, hey, you promised 6 o'clock, it's not here, I'm out of here. And she'll move on. And now we're really stuck, because now we're panicking and the patients panic, because now what are they going to do? So it really becomes an issue for us. So timing, as I put on my slide, timing is everything. It really is in this business. Didn't want to talk about employee safety. Sometimes you guys will see things like this. These are sharps containers. This is where patients dispose of the needles and things like that, things that are sharp. Less and less is there a requirement that your couriers will bring these products back to the pharmacy. Most of the time what's happening is we're sending out this product in this, what we call a mailback box. And it can actually be sent through UPS or even the Postal Service. It's acceptable as long as people package it the way it's supposed to be packaged. And what it does, it goes directly to an incinerator. And we don't have to touch it, which is kind of nice. But from time to time, your couriers may be asked, or a patient may say, hey, here, can you take this back to the pharmacy? You don't really want to touch this if you don't have to. Yeah. If you do have to touch it, that pharmacy should have notified you to say, hey, I need you to pick up, you know, Mrs. Jones' sharps container. And you guys should be trained on, well, that's biohazardous waste. How am I supposed to treat that? And you got to remember that tote that I have in one of my Zans? That's where that stuff would go. But again, it's becoming less and less, but I know there's pharmacies out there that still take it and they put it in bulk bins and then they ship it off to be incinerated. So there may be some pharmacies that will ask you to pick these things up. So just be aware of that. And if they do, your employees need to take the appropriate precautions. They should be trained by the pharmacy. One of the things too that I see, some patients will fill these things up, still not call for somebody to pick it up, and then they'll start using things like soda bottles and milk bottles or milk cartons. And that really becomes dangerous, obviously, because I remember many years ago when I had an employee that got punctured because the driver brought in a milk container, a plastic milk jug, and she went to just throw it into the incineration bin. And she actually scraped her, I think, thigh, and there was a needle that was protruding out of it and stuck her. And this is back when the HIV scare was going on. So, I mean, at its full-fledged height. And so that becomes a scary issue, and certainly we don't want anybody hurt by that. And I, quite frankly, wouldn't even pick up a product that wasn't in an acceptable and appropriate sharps container. I talked about, I'm almost done here, the value-added services that we talked about, things that you can offer that may be more valuable to a pharmacy. We send out things like IV poles, and there might be small, durable medical equipment. If you're there and we can teach your drivers how to assemble these, that might be of value, because otherwise we either have to pre-assemble them in our shop or we have to have somebody else go out and do it. So, if you can do some minor type things for us, that becomes of value to us. Or if you can help kind of set up, you're not doing any kind of clinical stuff, but if you're just setting up equipment, getting it plugged in, things like that, that's important to us. And I would certainly expect that the pharmacy would pay you, additionally for that kind of a service.
What kind of liability would we have doing that?
The pharmacy would have to indicate that you were trained on it.
Okay.
So we would, as long as you follow that protocol, and we all abide by that protocol, it's really going to be, unless your driver didn't follow that protocol, that would be a concern. But we're talking really pretty simple things. So
it's not going to kill anybody if the IV pole is not put in correctly.
Yeah, it shouldn't, and a lot. It shouldn't. The minute I say, of course not, what will happen is there's an IV pole that has a pump. It's going to fall over, and it's going to wrap around somebody's neck, and who knows what's going to happen.
And that's the worrisome part about being asked to do something like this.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Liability increases.
That's a risk that you.
Liability increases.
I think you need to assess whether that makes sense for you and the pharmacy. Again, I see fewer and fewer things that need to be kind of set up like that, because now IV poles are coming out just like you pitch those tents, you go out to like your kid's baseball game. Now they just unfold, they snap together, and there's nothing to it. So the patients can do that. But still, there's quite a few of the other old style poles that are out there, just because they're cheap. And they would, there's a lot of pharmacies that use those. So that's something that you might be able to do with them and say, you know what, I'll charge you an extra, $10, and I'll have my driver go ahead and put that together for you. I mean, assess it, look at it. We're typically not talking rocket science by any means. So it's going to take time. It might take your driver an extra 5 to 10 minutes to prepare something like that.
My concern would be you didn't set up the pole properly, so the medicine didn't drip properly, patient dies.
I think that's it.
I'm suing you.
Yeah.
Well, but you're not hanging. You're not hanging. Somebody else is hanging the meds, right?
Yeah.
Well, I understand, but I put together the pole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
You're right. No, you're right. You're right.
And that's something you would, if a pharmacy asks you, I think prudently you should go, well, let me see, what are you talking about here? Is this something that makes sense for me? Otherwise, I really don't want to touch it. And I think that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
So it's something that you as the business owner need to decide, what is my liability on it? I think that's a very
$1,000 a year
question.
If we're covered under the pharmacy as their agent going in, no problem.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're insured.
What you should, because if we trained you and we certify that you're trained to do that, then you should be covered by the pharmacy. Basically, in that regard, as a subcontractor, just like we do with anybody else that subcontracts with us. Other items too, it's really beneficial that since your driver is there, if they work with the patient, they can go through and make sure everything was received. So you've got the delivery ticket, it has all the items that should be delivered. And the thing about our industry, we deliver like a lot of stuff. We deliver maybe 10 to 15 different supply items that go out to the patients. So the last thing we want to do is find out 2 days later that the patient is out of something, and of course it would be like their midnight dose. So if our drivers people that work for us directly, will go out to a patient's home, and they will have the patient go through their box, and they will, they'll check off, did you get all this? It's that last and final check that they received everything. We don't expect couriers to do that, but if that were something that you would offer, again, I would anticipate the pharmacy may be willing to pay for that service, because they would much rather know that something was missing at that point than to find out something was missing at a critical juncture down the road when they didn't anticipate it. Here's that electronic signature capture. I think that's something that's going to gain acceptance. So if you already have that, I think if you can sell the idea, and sell them on the fact that the information that you capture meets accreditation requirements, because that's really that really drives it. And it's accreditation standards, and it's also Medicare standards. If your data capture provides enough information for proof of delivery for your pharmacy, your device should work. And it sounds like you've made that investment in this type of technology, so it really just needs to kind of be sold, if you will, to pharmacies. Because I think it's great, and it is of value, because we do work with couriers ourselves that have this, and it's great because I can get a download of that information, and now I'm good. I don't have to worry about it. So very, very positive item. So that's really about it. Any questions, comments? Yes.
So I came in a little late.
Uh-huh.
You own a specialty?
I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Emerita, which is a home infusion specialty pharmacy. So we've got locations. We have 12 locations. We've got 2 in Colorado, 1 in Colorado Springs and Denver. We have 1 in Salt Lake City. We've got 6 spread throughout Texas. We have 1 in Tulsa, and we have 2 in Tennessee. So we are a subsidiary of a company called Pharmaceutical, which does long-term care. In fact, I know Pharmaceutical uses courier services for some of the deliveries, so some of you may be very familiar with them. We are pretty separate. We don't do things too much jointly, but we are starting that route. We were just purchased by Pharmaceutical just about 6 months ago.
You're a specialty pharmacy.
We're
you're not a Rite Aid or a...
No,
we're definitely not a, we're not a retail.
You're not a hospital pharmacy. You specialize. You're going to do the higher end items if it's chemo or...
Yep.
And compound.
Yeah, exactly. We're compounding injectable medications. And the industry's been kind of in turmoil a bit because you remember that New England compounding center that had all those deaths in Tennessee?
Oh yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be laughing at it, but
you know what? It's because they just had willful disregard for the rules and regulations and standards, and that's why. But it gave the industry a black eye.
Yeah.
But what we do that's different than what they do. Everything that we produce is specific for one patient at a time.
Yes.
They were producing compounding batches of stuff that they would ship off to the hospitals, and hospitals would use it as if they were buying a pre-manufactured product.
Yeah.
So we do it specific to patient orders.
So let me ask, when are you going to open a location between Seattle and Portland?
And
number 2, how do we find more companies like yours?
There's a couple ways you can find us. There is a national organization called NHIA. So if you were to
Say it again?
it's NHIA. It's the National Home Infusion Association. You might be able to Google that. They have a website. They have a list of hundreds of participating pharmacies throughout the U.S.
Okay.
That's one way to find out.
The other way is get the SIC code for Emerita,
Yeah.
and then it just comes up.
Yeah.
But I have a question.
Yeah.
Really white glove what you do. Not a. How
Yes.
come you don't keep it in-house? Why? I'm just curious as the business decision that your company makes to outsource it versus keeping it inside.
Because you guys do a more efficient job.
Okay.
Here's what happens. We can send a driver out. We have a driver. He can go out, and then the next thing you know, we get a stat delivery. We get another order from a doctor. Hey, you got to change this.
That's their
so
issue.
the problem is now Joe's making 6 deliveries. I got to use somebody else now. So even if I have my own drivers, and oftentimes what happens is I will have like a core group of drivers, and then I'll use a courier service. Oftentimes what I try to do is I'll use my drivers to go out on those first deliveries. So when we have that brand spanking new patient that needs all that documentation signed, I'll send one of mine, or anything set up like the IV poles. Yeah. I'll send one of my guys, and then I'll call a courier to do all the refills, all the routine deliveries.
Isn't it hard too for you to staff because it's based on patient care need, and that can be 3 patients one day and 50 the next?
Is. That's the crazy thing about this business. We could go, one day we'll get nothing. The next day we'll get 20 referrals. Our business, we don't get 100 or 200 prescriptions like a Walgreens or a retail pharmacy. Right. Our business is feast or famine. So it's true. I've got a business that will get like 50 referrals in a day, and still one day during the week they might only get 5.
Who's referring you these patients?
Hospitals. Primarily hospitals, but physicians will too. But hospitals, the hospital discharge planners typically know us very well, and they call us or our competitors. Usually in a major market like a Seattle or Portland, there are going to be 15, 20 home infusion companies. So there's a lot in each
Absolutely.
community.
And I see that Walgreens now in our area, now they have trucks going up and down I-5 saying home infusion.
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of private companies now that are specializing in it too. I mean, you see big trucks. So they're doing more than just IV poles.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they're bringing in beds and.
Yeah, the biggest companies actually out there, Walgreens is one of the biggest companies in home infusion. And then there's Courier, who I used to work for.
Sure.
And then there's Aspire. It's
Apria?
Apria.
Okay,
Thank
Apria owns Courier.
Okay.
And Apria is kind of the DME arm, so they do the wheelchairs and beds. Yeah. But Courier does the home IV side.
Okay.
Their big thing is breathing, sleep apnea machines, machines.
Exactly.
We do a lot of that.
Respirators.
So
that's a good niche.
We're in the top 10 as a company, but we've only got 12 locations.
I'm sorry to get things from the past, because I had a meeting with Courier.
Yeah.
And their big thing was their regular customers that they wanted us servicing. They said, we don't care about the first ones, we'll just send that with some other couriers. We don't care.
Interesting.
But I have on your side, different. You want to have control over.
Yeah, because the first time they meet us, we want that that first impression to be impeccable.
Yep. Yes.
And so it's to me anyway. That's my personal view, and that's the way I run the operations for this company. That's the way I want. I want our customers to have a person that's really familiar with the documentation. If a question arises about this assignment of benefit, I want to know that my driver knows it and can explain what's on that sheet.
Right.
Not somebody that says, I need to get your signature. Well, what is this about? I don't really know.
You just got to get your signature.
Yeah, I just need your signature.
I understand. Just all of a sudden, when you said Courier, oh wait, I read that meeting.
Yeah, I don't know, that's interesting. When I was at Quorum, we had the same philosophy, which was, if we could get our own driver out with the first delivery, we tried to. If not, we're using couriers. But couriers will always be a mainstay in our industry because, again, we just don't know what the volume of patients we're going to have.
One day to another, 1 hour to another, what's going to happen.
And to me, I don't want to staff too much. I don't want to have guys just sitting around. Right. So for me, you guys, to me, are more variable cost. I pay as I go. If I need you, I pay you to do it. And that makes a lot of sense to me than me having 5 drivers and really one day I only need 1 of them. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Richard, are you guys still doing the audits where you'll actually send out patient satisfaction surveys to see was the driver courteous, was he well dressed, was he helpful and knowledgeable?
Yeah, we send out, actually it's a requirement of our accreditation that we send out satisfaction surveys. And delivery timeliness, things like that are on there. It's not specific, say to Courier, to that detail, but it is, was the delivery timely? Were the people that you talked to courteous? Things like that are on there.
Well, and if you're using a courier in a market that's starting to slack, wherever, and they're sending shabby drivers and their on-time performance is down, then you'll be able to narrow it down to a certain number of couriers and say, okay, we need to tune this up or maybe try somebody else.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you have a SOP for what you're looking for when you're selecting a courier service or a partner?
You know what, I don't have an SOP per se, but we do, we're looking for somebody that runs a higher end, more high quality courier service, we're probably not necessarily looking for the guy that's kind of the single guy doing his own thing. We like the technology that you mentioned. You're capturing data for us, signatures, things like that. That's important because a lot of the big companies are doing that, and we're finding that, sure, of course that's of value to us, because if we don't have it, we don't get paid. So to compete, you got to kind of be a high-tech courier service in a sense. So we look for that. We look, can we, are you going to have the resources that if we have a 20 referral day, if we're going to call you, you can still probably get another driver out there. Or if we call you in 5 minutes, it's not a hassle. I don't want to get feedback that, well, just send a driver out there. Well, we already got him on the road. We got another delivery. So we'd like to be able to count on that. And we'd just as soon make one phone call to one company and work with one, rather than remembering, wow, did I send that with XYZ? Did I send it with yours? So
quick question. In the New York area,
yeah,
some of this product could be carried by hand.
Yeah.
So sometimes the pharmacist wants a cheaper rate. However, can that product be go on a subway? Or that?
It could.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as somebody's going to handle it. Yeah, it could be, if that, because obviously that's a lot different than what we have here in Colorado.
Yeah, it's absolutely a lot different.
But you know what? As long as a courier is going to take it from one point to another and it's not going to leave their possession,
right?
I think a pharmacy would be open to that.
Okay, I'm just curious because they're always trying to drive a price point, but I don't know if they want it in the vehicle, even though it can go by hand.
Yeah, exactly. I realize, yeah, in each marketplace is going to be different situations. So, other thoughts or questions?
You were wonderful.
Thank you.
Some of my experience, what my company brings to the table in terms of helping the courier industry get involved and comply, I can assure you, and I don't want to frighten anybody, but if you run this flag up your flagpole and say we're going to do nuclear medicine, if you haven't attracted any attention from the regulators before, you will certainly attract some now. Nuclear medicine, we're talking about radioactive materials. Now, they may be very small in quantity and in severity. We're not talking about fuel rods or nuclear waste drums. But anytime you put a Class 7 label on a package, the public, the general public, and the people who work for you are going to become alarmed. Okay. Just write it down. They're going to say, well, you want me to do what? They're going to wonder whether or not they're going to be able to have children. They're going to wonder whether or not they're going to lose their hair. Yep. I can assure you that's not a problem after many years of doing this. Anyway, it's just there's a stigma to when you see that radiation symbol, and there should be, because it can be very, very hazardous, but it can be done very safely. Doesn't take a tremendous investment to get involved in this business, but it does take a commitment to excellence. And I think one of the interesting things about it is that if you go down this road, I think it would be very rewarding for you, professionally and personally. And I think that your drivers will feel as though they've contributed in some small way to helping people find out if they're sick or maybe get better. And one of the reasons that I was never going to be in medicine, I was never going to be a doctor or a physician, but I did lose a very dear friend to cancer. Back in 1998, just about the time I was finishing a project at my time during my time with the AirNet, to get them an exemption to carry more radioactive materials on board the aircraft, because we were doing very small aircraft. And in radioactivity, you can only have a certain amount of activity close to the guys that sit in the pointy end of the airplane, or your driver, or truck driver, whoever, cargo handler. And anyway, I participated in getting us an exempt status to federal, excuse me, I'm trying to say this correctly. We got party status to the exemption that Federal Express enjoyed for many years, and we were the first carrier ever to get party status to that exemption back in 1998. I was working on that when Kevin died, and he said, you've done really great things here for me and for my family, and now I understand you're working on this thing. He goes, just take it as far as you can take it, push it, make whatever contribution you can. So I have a personal stake in making sure, in Kevin's memory, that we provide a service, and we provide it smartly and efficiently to people who need it. So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with nuclear medicine advances. Some of the stuff you're all familiar with, you've probably heard it before. As one of the other speakers said, probably all of us know someone who's dealt with cancer at some level. So we've heard terms like X-ray and MRI and CAT scan and ultrasound and PET scan. We've heard those things. PET scan, PET, positron emission tomography. Has anybody heard that term?
No.
Okay. Nuclear medicine is more prevalent now than ever. 1 out of 3 patients admitted to a hospital these days gets some kind of procedure that involves radioisotopes or isotopes. And what we're trying to do is contribute to the techniques improving a physician's ability to diagnose, and I should have put treat, certain ailments. The applications of this are, one of the things you can sell to your crews and your drivers is that we're talking about medicine that is going to go into the body, either orally or injection. So them carrying it inside a lead pig that weighs about 50 pounds with a very small amount of isotopes in a saline solution really isn't going to be very harmful to them unless we put them in a radiation field of about 60 Ti, which isn't going to happen. So I can talk with you about more of that in a minute. And some of these indications require multiple treatments, which means you're going to get more business out of this. So that's another reason it's attractive to you guys. The radiation that's emitted by the isotopes can be located in the body, similar to the pictures of the scans that are here, and that these gamma cameras capture images in the isotopes, and then computers enhance the image so that the doctors and clinicians can make determinations about treatment. This is for detection of tumors and fractures, measurement of blood flow, determination of thyroid and pulmonary function. Clinical trials have yielded success in cell-targeted therapies. Everybody understand what I mean by cell-targeted therapies? Everybody heard of that? It's where we have a disease like lymphoma or B-cell lymphoma or leukemia. And one of the drugs that comes to mind is a drug called FDG, which is made of a fluorine-18 radioisotope, which is paired with some other elements. It's delivered to the cells. Cancer cells really like the sugar, okay? So the FDG, fluorodeoxyglucose, it's attached to a glucose molecule. And the cancer cell grabs the glucose because it likes the sweet. And then little does it know that the fluorine-18 atom is attached to it. So it's easy to take a picture of it. It's also easy to treat, and it gobbles up the cancer cell. That's a very, very basic way of explaining how FDG works. Injection of radiolabeled peptides, proteins, monoclonal antibodies. I could go in for an hour and talk to you about monoclonal antibodies, but I don't want everyone to go to sleep. So basically, monoclonal antibodies are devices, are small medicines that they're rooted from one single immuno source. In other words, you can get immuno drugs out of lots of different sources. Monoclonals is because it's from a single source. It delivers the radioactivity directly selectively to the surface of the cancer cell. Like a smart bullet, it irradiates and kills the cancer in place. Leukemia remission rates have now risen above 80% when used in conjunction with bone marrow. And contrast that with chemotherapy, which for years was used as the medicine treatment for cancer, all types of cancer, but had really highly toxic side effects, as many of you, if you know anybody that's had cancer, are probably aware of. Cell-targeted therapy is really popular. One example that I came across in doing some research for this presentation was a Hodgkin's disease patient in Texas. The lady she failed 13 rounds of chemotherapy and whole body radiation, not to mention the side effects that she suffered. And part of that suffrage was she was given 6 months to live. She tried a radical new therapy when this first came out of clinical trial. She switched to cell-targeted therapy with what's called yttrium-90. She was treated as outpatient at 1/10 the cost of the traditional drugs that she was getting before. She had minimal side effects, and it halted the advancement of her disease, and she was actually extended her life, and she actually saw her children graduate from college. Some more benefits. These are non-invasive procedures. The nuclear imaging that we're talking about involves bone scans, the positron emission tomography we talked about, single photon emission computed tomography, SPECT, and cardiovascular imaging. This eliminates most exploratory surgeries, where some of our parents, and maybe their grandparents years ago, had to go have a surgery, open them up, find a whole bunch of stuff in there, and close them up and say, you're going to die. So not a good thing, really. So this is much more user-friendly and much more preferable than the old techniques. The radiopharm market consists of the manufacturers and shippers. I'm going to talk a little bit about them. I'll talk about their transportation preferences, the present market conditions, and the medical courier's role. These are some of the most active players in the marketplace. Some of these are names that you've seen before: Cardinal Health, Jubilant Jax Image, GlaxoSmithKline, LMI. These are also some clients of mine who they have asked me to go out and find them courier companies who are reliable and safe So I act as liaison for some of these manufacturers to find them solutions in certain areas. A lot of times it's in a remote area. Who can you get me to take something all the way to Laramie? Who can you get to take me to Godibo, Utah? So while that's rare, and most of the time cancer patients will be traveled to like the Cleveland Clinic or Mayo up at Rochester, Mayo Clinic. Lots of times, because of the advances here, these procedures can be taken out to patients. Sometimes patients can't travel. Transport preferences, because of the high dollar value of this cargo and the limited viability, in other words, the half-life of the item, the reputation in the medical community that they're relying on to preserve their reputation. They want that really drives the relationship-based operation towards people like yourselves, smaller companies, usually small. Some of you I know are very large, but some of you are very tight in medical and have niche markets. They want that. They want a dedicated server. They want someone that takes ownership of what they need done, and they know they can rely on you. Medical shippers, hospitals, they want a lasting, long relationship. So it's not really very difficult. If you build it, they will come. This is definitely I was telling one of my colleagues a few minutes ago how this is a build it first and they'll come. If you tell them that you're thinking about pursuing it, they're probably going to be polite and talk with you. But if you haven't made the investment and you haven't told them, yes, we are pursuing this, we've hired so-and-so to train us, whatever you've done, if you can't prove to them that you're on a track to be successful, they're just going to go talk to someone else. So it does require a commitment from you. But it does result in usually very long-lasting relationships and very loyal, dedicated service from your part, which prolongs the relationship with the clinics. North American radiopharmaceuticals market last year was valued at $1.9 billion, poised to reach 2.7 in another couple of years, and that's at a compound annual growth rate of 7.2. 96% of all RAM transported, all radioactive material. This includes all the stuff they truck out to Yucca Mountain in Utah, the nuclear fuel rods and everything else. The bulk of 96% is radioactive medicine. You can get a significant yield through capturing only a small portion of this market because of the specialty nature of it. There aren't a whole lot of competitors that are going to follow you down this road. So therefore, if you're in a region and you become the vendor of choice, you can eliminate a lot of your competition if you've made this investment and you can do it competently and safely. So this establishes you in this market as a leader very quickly if you make the commitment to join in. The regulatory authorities that have oversight are, of course, the U.S. Department of Transportation, and through their enforcement arm, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA, which some of you may remember used to be known as Research and Special Programs Administration, or RISPA. The requirements for complying are found in 49 CFR, that's the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 49. And the training is in Subpart H. The operations and packaging, handling, and record keepings sections are found just behind there. Again, this is Title 49, the Federal Regulations Code. And it, like, in anybody pilot in here? Anybody pilot? CFR 14?
He's gone.
Okay. Agriculture, CFR 29. Every area of our lives is controlled by some code of federal regulations, it seems. Anyway, transportation is governed under 29. The transportation requirements, as I said, are in Subpart H, specifically Section 172.704. And those requirements are as follows. You must have general awareness familiarization training. As courier companies, if you aren't going to carry one item of dangerous goods, I recommend strongly that you at least hire someone to come in and give your team on a 3-year basis general awareness training. That is so that when they pick up or see a dangerous goods package, they know what it is, they can identify it, and they go, our company doesn't do that. If they pick it up and transport it, you have a liability. If you're going to do dangerous goods, then you have to move into function-specific training, then you have to move into safety training and understand a program for emergency response if something was to go wrong. And then you have to have security awareness, and sometimes you have to have an extended security plan. Talking about nuclear medicine in particular, there are certain quantities, which I'm not going to delve into because it's really complicated for this overview. But if you carry a certain amount, what is called a highway route controlled quantity, it's like 3,000 times the A1 value of the package. I don't want to get into it all, but you might be required, if your business gets big enough and you carry enough truckload, to have what's called a in-depth security program. That's really doubtful given the nature of what you're hauling. So in-depth security training program requirements only come into play if you're doing a large quantity. The shipper requirements for shippers are found in Part 173, and Subpart I specifically deals with radioactive materials. Some of the things you'll need to concern yourselves with are what types of equipment and vehicles will you select to do this transport. The real quick and dirty on radioactive material is something that's very hot, like we call a hot package, has a lot of radioactivity. There's a heat analogy that goes along with radioactivity. There's what's called a transportation index, and it's a number that is assigned to a package based on how much radioactivity is coming off of the package. If you put several of those packages together, obviously they have to be totaled together for safety reasons, for conservative safety reasons. So you want to separate whoever's handling or driving that package from that cargo so that they're not overexposed. The maximum allowable occupational exposure is 5,000 millirem or 5 rem per year per employee. Most courier companies like yourselves dealing with radioactive pharmaceuticals don't come anywhere near this. If we were to go out and measure and you estimated what a company was going to give you on a regular basis, and you're going to use regular drivers and not rotate them, those are all decisions that come into play when you're doing radioactive medicine. If we saw that you were going to approach maybe a maximum occupational therapy, occupational exposure limit, then we would have to rotate drivers or get different equipment to keep your drivers away from this material. Think about going to the dentist every day, having them put the vest on you and getting an x-ray. If you did that 3 times a day, for years, you're still not going to have very much exposure. The vest they put on you at the dentist is really for comfort. They're trying to say to you, we're concerned about your safety. You're going to get an x-ray. You're going to get dosed for a split millisecond. We're going to take a picture of your teeth. It's not going to kill you. Okay? And I don't know about you, but I don't like to go to the dentist anyway. So don't go to the dentist. I don't go to the dentist that often anyway. My firm, what we specialize in doing is we try to assist you in creating Subpart H compliant materials so that you can, we take very complex rules and regulations that are updated all the time, make them very simple for you and for your people to understand and to live by and operate by. There's a specific radioactive materials section that I focus on where we teach your people how to accept packages, how to appropriately handle packages, and teach them about separation distances so that they're not overexposed. Some of the things that I will help you work on if you were to choose my firm would be have a strategy session where we go, okay, who's our market, what's the region, where are we going to go after this business? Set about creating a schedule, a goal and time that we're going to be able to offer the service to the people that want to ship with you. Then the creation of appropriate training materials and take all the complexities out, make it very simple, layman's terms so that your drivers can understand what they can and cannot do. And then I put in this term here, ALARA. What we always want to do is follow this principle, and that stands for as low as reasonably achievable. We always want to keep everybody's handling and exposure to as low as reasonably achievable. We don't want to park these packages out on a dock and have that be the very place where everybody goes to have a cigarette when they have a break. Okay? We don't want to have everybody gather at the back of a van when they've closed the door and the radioactive materials packages are sitting there and stand there and have a 20-minute debate about last night's football game, because the radiation will travel through the door of the vehicle and onto the individuals that are standing there. So the training programs are designed to heighten people's awareness about these kinds of exposure concerns and to make sure that the goal of ALARA is always attained. Again, the strategies and best method for training, we can do a centralized program where I come out and do a classroom, a lecture-based environment, or we can try to do a remote disc-based or even internet teleconference. I have to be honest with you. Ken's company is absolutely got it drilled down to a science on how to train people to handle infectious substances. I'm forgetting the term I want. Biological specimens. They've got it down. His program is, bar none, probably the best program I've ever seen. In my 25 years, I've seen many. And however, the complications and the questions that come out of the unwashed masses of students that I teach when you talk about nuclear material, because of all the things I've said before, it's just, I think, a better environment to have someone like me standing there who can stand there and talk with them as long as they'd like to talk until they're comfortable with this type of material. Once you get it through their heads that they're not going to be overexposed, they're not going to lose their ability to procreate, they're not going to lose their hair. You know, it really is. It is humorous. But I absolutely have never lost respect for their concerns, because you're asking them to do something that they've been taught since childhood. You know, nuclear. You know, it just sends people in a direction. I'm comfortable with it just because of the years of experience. The training materials.
Your hair.
Yeah, the training. Yeah, it gets longer. The training materials would be developed and tailored to your mission. I do not have a canned program, even though many of the materials are the same. What my firm specializes in is coming into your company. So the name of my company is Transportation Resource Partners, because what we do is we come in and we partner with you. We take your logo, take your pictures of your people, your vehicles. We design the program so that, for all the reasons I mentioned about comfort, so that we show your trainees, your drivers, that you are committed to their safety. This isn't just Dangerous Goods Council comes in and says, this is what you got to do, or else. Or Dangerous Goods International comes in and gives you 4 days. Now, those guys are terrific trainers. I have a lot of friends that work for DGI. They're a terrific company. But what they're going to do is they're going to say, oh, you need radioactive materials? Well, you're going to have this, you're going to have that. And you're going to lose your people for 3 days. What we do, my philosophy is, the requirement, as I spelled out for you in the training requirements, is that you get function-specific training, and the definition of that goes on to say, based upon the functions your employee is going to perform. So if your employee is going to go out and pick up a nuclear package, put it in his van, and drive it somewhere, why would you want him to go learn about explosives, compressed gas, dangerous when wet, dare I say, biological specimens, miscellaneous dangerous goods, dry ice. If you've got a guy that's going to go do nuclear, we're going to train him how to do that. If you want me to teach him something else, we can do that. And if all of a sudden you went out and got another piece of business, my company's philosophy is, and I think what segregates me from all the other my competitors, is that we shorten the amount of time your people are involved. We give them dedicated training that has all of your logo and says that you're committed to their safety. And then we don't teach them anything they don't need to know. Now we do insist, I insist, that you get a general awareness module before you get the specific training, because they have to understand what they cannot do. And at the very beginning, as a disclaimer, it says, we're going to teach you how to do radioactive medicine. We're going to teach you how to pick up these boxes, look at these documents, and do it correctly. We're not going to teach you how to do hand grenades. We're not going to teach you how to do gases or flammable liquids. So if you find yourself picking something up, if someone hands you one of those, if you hadn't had the general awareness training to tell you about the other 8 classes of dangerous goods, you're not going to know not to pick it up. And somebody's going to want to do the right thing and say, oh, well, I'm here, I might as well, maybe they want me to pick this up. Negative. And this is part of what the culture that we'll create, is that you're going to do one thing, and then all of a sudden you go out and find a book of business, and it's miscellaneous dangerous goods, and we'll teach you how to do dry ice in class 9. Or if you find flammable gas, we'll go out and teach you how to do flammable gas. And what we'll do is we'll just create a module that teaches them function-specific training, gives them function-specific training on how to do that particular dangerous good, and we'll add it in. But we won't hijack your operation for 3 days and put everybody through a 36-hour deal. There'll be forms we'll have to create. Some of you will have bills of lading that we'll have to create specifically regarding this kind of material, and you'll have to abide by the record-keeping requirements as they're put forth in the 49 CFR. We'll have to establish local authority contacts. People will call in case of emergency, or if we have a question and you can't reach me, you don't have an in-house specialist. We'll establish restricted areas where people will be forbidden to go unless they are going to be actually handling packages. And then we'll create signage that will warn people of those types of situations. This is a picture of the cover of the 2012 Emergency Response Guidebook, which I recommend all of you have anyway if you're in the courier business, because you just never know what you're going to need it for. And then we'll define clear responsibility assignments from your sales team all the way to your dispatchers and drivers and compliance officers if you happen to have one in-house. I can't stress enough that the guys that go out and sell your business don't want to overpromise what they can do with regard to nuclear medicine. Okay? Don't want to overpromise that. And also, they're going to have to work really closely with you, maybe even with me if I'm working with you, to discover what's that bottom line, what's this costing us? Because they can't go out and sell it at a price unless they know what it's costing. And there are a lot of hidden costs. That's why if we do all our homework correctly in the beginning, if we liaison and partner together, we'll know what those costs are, and you can have a more effective sales team. So anyway, we'll have to have clearly delineated responsibility assignments. Again, we'll see signs like this in restricted areas. We'll establish stowage areas where maybe something has to be stored for 2 hours before it goes out somewhere else. That is unlikely because of the short shelf life, or what's called a half-life of the radioactive material. I was just reading, double checking something on my tablet a few minutes ago, and the fluorodeoxyglucose, the FDG drug, it has a half-life of 109.22 minutes. So every 109 minutes, if you have this much, in an hour and 9 minutes, it's going to be this much. And it's going to shrink by half, and shrink by half, and shrink by half.
So to that point, what's the liability for a courier carrying that, and it shrinks because
For
of
FDG? Well,
some delay somewhere along life's line?
Well, Richard was talking with you about viability, and about after a certain period of time, the drug is just no longer useful. Yeah, there will come a time when delayed delivery with FDG or any of the other radionuclides that will, and then we'll know what those are ahead of time because we'll negotiate them out with, and hopefully you'd have an alternative plan, but there will come a time when the drug just simply isn't useful. Think about it as going to down to the ice house and getting a great big block of ice, and the goal is to carry that ice and get it all the way across town or across the country and still have a useful ice cube left to cool your drink.
Good analogy.
That's because you've got a product that's constantly decaying. That's the term we use in the industry. Again, ALERA stands for as low as reasonably achievable. To have success in this market, you have to have a philosophy and a culture that fosters a commitment to operational excellence. And you can only get this new market promise if you're a leader in the future of this market. So I don't want to overstress it, but it really is important that if you decide to go down this road, you get professional assistance. My firm does this. There are several other quality firms that do this. I like to think with my experience at having created an entire market for the airline that I was part of years ago, and with the experience that I've had on Capitol Hill with negotiating rules and regulations that we have to live by, I think we're well qualified to help you do this. But that doesn't mean we're the only ones that are capable. There are a lot of other companies with bigger logos and fancier titles, and they can help you as well. But I don't think any of them are going to give you focused training with the experience that my firm brings to the table. And then along with those services of training and creating programs in-house for you, we do a lot of other things. We do operational security, clearly medical and healthcare transport, international cargo shipping if you should find yourself in that environment, live animal plants, air and ground cargo operations. I can also help you do technical writing if you're having issues with writing an operational manual, even if it doesn't involve dangerous goods. Unlike Keith, I'm a law school dropout, but I did take legal writing. You have to take legal writing your first year, and I think I'm a pretty decent writer. And we'll develop your training program. We'll help you with your marketing materials if you want to create that kind of stuff with us. And then in the unanticipated event that we receive a civil penalty letter, that someone has seen us do something wrong, or seen us violate a rule, or doesn't believe we've trained our people accordingly, I can help you respond to that too. In my 13 plus years, almost 14 years with AirNet Systems as the senior regulatory advisor, you can imagine that in the scope of our operations as we enter dangerous goods, we got a few letters of inquiry and a few civil penalty proposals. I can tell you that I had a perfect record of negotiating all of those to zero until the very last one came in 2 months before I left. A law firm that shipped paper products with us, legal documents, every night from Detroit to Columbus and Columbus to Detroit. One of their attorneys decided it was a good idea to take some spray silicone car wax, an aerosol container, take 2 cans and put them inside the box, give them to us. Didn't declare it, looked like the same box. Got a stack of air bills for 6 years prior to that that says printed matter, printed matter, printed matter. Somehow our sort team lost it. We gave it to UPS. They flew it to Louisville. It fell off a tug. The tug ran over it. Instead of a bunch of legal papers going everywhere, we had 2 aerosol cans blow up. Of course, the FAA was standing there that night inspecting their operation.
Oh my God.
So who gave you this package? Well, this is an AirNet. And this is not a lick on AirNet. I'm not here to badmouth AirNet. AirNet is very good to me, and I'm very proud of what I did for them. In fact, someone mentioned this morning how reliable they are with regard to their medical business. I'm proud to tell you that their medical existence exists because we had a heck of a sales guy. We had me designing all their programs 20 years ago. So they're still an industry leader, and I'm very pleased and proud of the work that I did there. And they're a great team, and I still have a lot of great friends there. Long story short, we argued and argued with PHMSA about the undeclared package, the brown wrapper. How am I supposed to know what's in there? I showed them, documents of 6 years worth of, air bills that said, look, this law firm gives us printed matter every night. There's just no way anybody could have anticipated this. And in the end of the day, the stuff was an aerosol can, but it didn't meet the definition of aerosol. So they tried to find us some ridiculous number, and I believe we negotiated it down to $5,000, which we recovered from the law firm who gave us the package. Ruined my perfect record, but I'm happy to admit that story because it proves how bad it can go quickly if you're not vigilant, and also what's out there waiting to grab you. So you need a guy like me to come in and say, wait a minute, first of all, don't respond to this letter yet. Call him back and ask him for 30 extra days. There's a little bit of free advice. If you ever get a civil penalty letter, write him back and say, I'm going to need 30 days to do an adequate answer. I owe you an adequate answer for why this happened. So that's a little bit of free advice. Anyway, we do a lot of different things. I told you about the strategic business planning and things we do. This is important and should be important too because we help you with a really difficult aspect of transportation, which is normally only an occasional assignment. Most folks don't do dangerous goods exclusively. It comes your way and you choose to do it, and it can become an occasional assignment. Well, then you don't want to pay someone in-house to be that guy you run to. So you call us, and we'll help you. And finally, I think this is my last slide. I wanted to demonstrate to you, and this is not to frighten anybody, but I just want to make sure everybody understands that the Moving Ahead for Progress initiative from PHMSA, MAP 21, just passed in April. I believe it was this year, yeah. And after October 1st last year, they're now saying that the max civil penalty has increased from $55,000 to $75,000 for knowingly violating. That's if they can prove that you knew the rule was there and you went ahead and violated it anyway. Well, that's rare that they can do that. The max civil penalty for knowingly violating laws and regulations that result in death, serious illness, injury to any person, or substantial destruction of property has increased from $110,000 to $175,000. The $250 minimum civil penalty has been eliminated. In other words, it used to be no matter what happens, we're dinging you for $250. And the violations related to training has reverted to the $450 level. I want to be clear that these violations, like the $55,000 to $75,000, if we accept a package and it's not described correctly on the documentation, that's a violation because we haven't done our due diligence by accepting it correctly. Again, nobody expects a courier to know that it's tritium versus Y-tritium, but we will educate the team so that they know what to look for, and we'll have a partnership with the shipper that will know what to look for every night. And if we see something different, then we'll refuse to accept the package. So there are methods to avoid some of these details. My point here is that they'll get you for that, and if, say, the wrong labels in the package, or say the wrong TI activities on the package, or it's $75,000 each time. So messing up one of these packages, really, I don't like talking about this stuff because it scares you away. It scares you away from me, it scares you away from helping industry. But you need to understand that this is a discipline, and it takes a commitment, and you need really good training and really committed drivers in order to succeed at this. It can be done. It's being done now. Okay, people are out there succeeding at it. There's no reason why you can't as well. So I just want to be clear that that's not $75,000 per shipment. That can be $75,000 per incident. An incident is defined as failure to train, failure to provide proof of training, failure to do an acceptance checklist, failure to verify content, failure to spot a damage in the package. 75 times 8. All of a sudden, one box has cost you everything you're going to make in a year. So it behooves us all to be vigilant and to dedicate ourselves to doing this correctly.
Keith's got you beat with the 1.5 million.
With the what?
1.5 million.
He's got you beat with the 1.5
Oh, no,
million.
3 boxes and you're done. You're at 1.5 million with 3 boxes.
Is that a number you came up with? The point is, it can get expensive.
Yeah.
You need someone that's connected to the industry and to the regulators to help negotiate that. Now, that's what they're going to send you a letter and say, we believe you've done this. And then we'll get together and write a letter back that says, well, we disagree. And we'd like to set a meeting with you and talk about, and then you come in and take a look at everything you've done to comply, And then I have a couple of strategies that have been really successful. I wouldn't be much of a business guy if I told you what they all are right now for free. But I have a couple strategies whereby we can reasonably convince the authorities that we certainly never intended to violate the regulation, and that we cannot predict human behavior, and therefore mistakes are going to happen.
Can a courier get rich doing this?
No.
Well, we were an air carrier at AirNet. We opened a $14 million niche by going this route. Now, it was expensive to create that, to train all the pilots, get all the equipment.
Right.
Yeah, we spent a lot of money. But it was a $14 million niche per year. So, I mean, it's a pretty good return.
Who's some of the local players who are some of the players that serve this market?
In terms of manufacturers or
No,
carriers?
Carriers.
Cardinal's one.
Well, he's saying carriers.
Carriers.
You've got Ameriflight out in California. You've got Suburban Air in Omaha. You've got, these are clients of mine, you've got Alpine Air in Salt Lake City. AirNet occasionally will call me. They're still in the game, although I don't believe that they own the same proportion of the market that they used to. Federal Express can help you, but Federal Express doesn't really fit the mold, because if you're not in their box by 5 p.m., you're not going to go, which is why companies like AirNet have succeeded. You know, remember that what we gave this industry by getting this capability was everything FedEx gave them, but better. The LMI facility up in Massachusetts, up in New Bedford, they rearranged their entire schedule, because it used to have the stuff in the box by 5, and FedEx would deliver it by 7 or 8, or maybe sometime 10. Well, that half-life window, you know, from the time they pick it up, it's got to still be viable by the time it gets to the destination. Not only there, it's got to travel to the patient, get into the patient, take the picture. So sometimes it was 24 hours. Well, now all of a sudden, because AirNet cut that time frame in half, we don't have to produce as much product. That saved LMI just billions of dollars. So they revamped their entire manufacturing schedule back in 98, 99, based on AirNet's schedule. And actually, in the end run, it saved the patient money, it saved everybody money, because part of the cost of this is because so much has to be produced because of transportation. Transportation is a huge part of it, you know, because of the competency required, because of the time frames. And so if they don't have to, if I got to produce this much to get it into the patient in 24 hours, maybe I only got to produce this much to get it there in 12, or maybe only this much to get it there in 8, depending on the certain routes and creative solutions that we can all come up with for these carriers, or for these manufacturers. You know, you can lower their costs and therefore bring value to them for them to ship with and carry with you. And then if you're connected, once the airplane touches the ground, if you're real well connected in a certain region, you can save them, which saves everybody else. So,
Carl, can you touch briefly on Class 3 nuclear med, like for
Category
thyroid?
3?
Yeah.
Category 3?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in radioactive circles, you have 3 categories of materials. There's Category 1, white 1, yellow 2, and yellow 3.
Mm-hmm.
It all has to do with transportation index and just how much activity is going on inside the package. Category 3 is the highest, because anything over 1 TI, transportation index of 1 and higher, is automatically Category 3. Category 3 requires placarding of vehicles, some extra procedures, some measuring devices, something like those types of environments. Generally, pharmaceuticals are going to be Category 0 or Category 1 and 2. So you're not going to have those kinds of concerns. But again, those can all be addressed. Did I answer?
Yeah, and so those smaller things are the things that go to the hospitals for, like a thyroid scan and things like that.
We're talking about pharmaceutical dose units, okay, that are going to come in about a 35 or 50 pound package. And the reason is there is a little saline mechanism inside where the element itself is inside this very rigid metal, like 35 pounds of lead to shield. But you've got a little piece of might be 1/4 of my fingernail here, my little fingernail. And so that is giving off this irradiation that irradiates the saline, which creates the drug. Okay, and it's done at a pharmacy. See, a carrier will take a raw product, like a molybdenum 99 generator, and they'll haul it to a pharmacy. And then they'll truck it over to the pharmacy, and then they'll go back 5 hours later, and the technicians have worked all night to create these dose units off that generator. And the dose units are set to go to all kinds of different cities. And then the carrier gets to take them back out and distribute them across the country or across the region. And then that's where the ground courier comes in terms of expediting the pickup, delivery to the patient, which generally, if I understand it correctly, I'm not a doctor, Generally, a procedure like this occurs really early in the morning because the doctors like to play golf in the afternoon.
No, that's true. We did some work in Colorado Springs on behalf of Cardinal for a while, and so my next question to you was: is Cardinal the main pharmacy that does that? There's a lot of ground level work that goes on. And you're exactly right. In the morning, it's expedited, it's rushed, and a lot of times it can be a long distance.
Yeah, it can be. It can be. Cardinal is one of the premier leaders in pharmaceutical doses. I mean, they've got pharmacies across the country now. You can't take a device that manufactures this stuff and put it in every city USA. I mean, there is some probably in a strip mall right down the street from where you live, and you don't even know that this generator is there. Okay, because they don't put up signs that say, "Hey, we're making nuclear material here."
There's no danger.
We're bringing some stuff in from Hanford. We're gonna, watch the place glow at night. So you could argue that there ought to be more regulated and that more of us should know what's in our backyard and so on. But those facilities where they manufacture these products are very safe. They're called cyclotrons, and the cyclotrons are located. When we first got into this business, there weren't very many, and so the transportation, the emphasis on transporting them long distances was very important. Now there are more of them, and so now locally, you probably have one here in the region. I mean, there are probably several just around this area, and across the country, it's probably hundreds now. And so, the ground courier has become more important than the air courier because it doesn't have to travel as far as fast. So there's a tremendous market available for you if you're so inclined. Any more questions? Forgive me for going so fast. I just wanted to do it while I was still awake. I got all of 4 hours of sleep last night.
So do you have some kind of ROI for it? Why would I want to get into this? What's my return? So because I'll have to invest in a whole program. I'll have to invest in equipment, training.
Well, talk about the equipment. Hang on. What equipment is required for a courier to transport this?
Really not a whole lot of equipment. It comes down to the training. It comes down to making sure you have an adequate vehicle, a vehicle that can place this radioactive material in the rear of the truck. Maybe if it makes your driver feel more comfortable, cover it with a lead blanket. I got to be honest. These are very low levels of radiation. Right. But if you put 10 packages back there, you're still not going to do any harm to your driver, but there is a separation table in the regulations that says if you're carrying 4.2 Ti, you've got to have 68 inches, you've got to have 78 inches, you've got to have, sometimes all of a sudden, hey, we need a bigger vehicle, or we got to send 2 vehicles. Those kinds of things, those kinds of strategies, you've got to understand what your customer's going to give you and when and how often. And so it's like I was explaining to Ken Sink earlier, the guy from Illinois. It's a very complex puzzle, and we got kind of mosaic, put together a picture so that you minimize your costs and maximize your profits. I think the dialogue would be, find out about where are you really strong, where's your area of operation?
Seattle.
Okay, Seattle. Well, then, Cardinal Health has an office out there. I used to go out there all the time. And,
but they have their own fleet.
They used to have their own fleet. I'm not certain that they think they still do, but they do still farm out some business.
They do a lot of stat work. You'd be surprised how much stat work you can get out of Cardinal.
Emergency shipments like that do
Just
occur.
take a look at the vehicles they're using, and that kind of gives you an indication of what's going to happen.
I've seen
I would
Pontiac
imagine that
Vibes.
the yield in terms of the revenue you're going to get is going to be much higher than cash.
Right. It's not going to be a $20 run. It's going to be a $50, $60, $70 run.
$120 run, depending on mileage.
Yeah, I mean, it's all relevant to the amount of effort that's required and the amount of compliance efforts that's required.
Well, that's the other thing. Add into the fleet that you have when you go to them, say we want to get into nuclear medicine with training and all, and a lot of times, what type of vehicles do you have?
Sure.
What do you need? We need trucks. You got to buy a bunch of trucks who do, $64 million question.
Yeah, I mean, not to sound like every other lawyer, but it depends.
Yeah.
I mean, of course it does. I mean, where are you? Who's going to ship with you? What are their specific needs?
We're going to give you, we're going to give you 1 at a time, and then all of a sudden, hey, we got to give you 10.
Yeah.
So then you're scrambling.
With everything. And being part of the courier industry, you guys all know that can happen with tennis balls. That can happen with videotapes. That can happen with candy bars. Yeah. But when it happens with this, it's important that you have all your ducks in a row.
Right. What does the market look like in New York?
I think it's tremendous. That is the, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, New Hampshire, all that that is the hotbed of
DC?
a lot of these labs and, yeah.
DC,
Anywhere
Maryland,
in that
Virginia?
northeast quadrant, sure. But you've also got to remember.
Did you hear that?
I missed that one.
Larry, you're not taking them to the subway. You said.
Right, yeah. Yeah, well, actually, the subway has detectors on it, Larry.
Yeah.
Oh.
We have trucks, we have trucks, we put them in trucks.
As you know.
Now, the question was asked about vehicles. We have a branch of Cardinal in Colorado Springs, and their drivers drive Pontiac Vibes.
Right, but it's a controlled amount that they're taking. Like
Right.
you said, it has to be under a certain amount.
Right.
And if that's nuclear medicine they have in there, they deliver all kinds of medical,
Yeah, you don't know if it's-
pharmaceutical.
yeah,
So
You're absolutely right. They were using Vibes. I had some experience with that. And they were actually angry when they stopped making the Vibe because it screwed up their vehicle of choice.
Is there a thing
Hey, it's
where
called
you,
the
if
Corolla
you're carrying that, you gotta put a
Matrix,
sticker on
or
outside
it's
car?
the Toyota
Yes.
Matrix.
Yeah, you
It's
have
the
to
same
plaque
thing.
the vehicle anytime you carry
Actually,
an amount over
Toyota designed the product.
50 Ti. Or if you
Just,
have one package, here's
skinned
the
it and
kind of
built it
crazy
in
part about
California.
nuclear. If you have one package that's a category 3, one package, you can have 15 packages on there that don't add up to, or that actually exceed what the one package of category 3 has in it, and not have to placard. But if you have one category 3, in other words, it's the old proverbial, we got to draw the line in the sand somewhere. And they've determined, DOT and PHMSA have determined that anytime you have a category 3, you're going to have to placard a vehicle. Now, it's really unlikely that you'll get category 3 very often in dose units. If your market is the radioactive medicine pharmacy, you're not going to see category 3 very often. It's possible, but not very likely.
And if we did, would your training provide that certification to transport category?
Sure, yeah.
And
It just then becomes an administrative function, whether or not you're equipped with equipment to placard the vehicle and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, if you've had the training, you'll be equipped to do a category 3 package. Yes, even though the likelihood of it is rare. But
Yeah.
then it just comes down to: is your company going to invest in placards, the magnetic kind that can go on the vehicle and satisfy that requirement?
What do most companies require, a 2-year or newer vehicle? I mean, they don't want an old vehicle carrying them. It's time critical, a lot of stuff.
It varies. I mean, nobody requires you to have a brand new fleet of vehicles. I mean, I've got some clients that have some very, very old trucks, but they're expertly maintained, and they satisfy the separation distance. One of the
Everybody
things
requires different things.
Sure. What you can expect is some real scrutiny from these potential shippers. They're going to ask you a lot of hard questions.
Yeah.
Because they have to. They have a liability. They have a responsibility giving you a package. My beef with the federal regulators has always been that they put all the emphasis on us, on the transporters. Whether you're flying airplanes or driving trucks or putting them on a train, for some reason, why is all this in transportation regulations? Why isn't there a nuclear? Well, there are the NRC and the IAEA. There's a ton of regulations. When they get down to transporting it, because it goes into the public domain. Okay, that's the rationale. And so they come out and beat up on the carrier, when in actuality, the company hired a new guy and he didn't know the rules and put the wrong sticker on, and they gave you the wrong package. But hopefully, if we've all done our jobs right, your agent is going to pick it up and look at it and know that it's wrong. And truthfully, if he does, and he doesn't realize that it's mistaken, and there's a comma out of place in the radioisotope description, that is technically a violation. But that kind of stuff you can argue away. What you can't argue away is, I've been doing this for 6 months. My driver's been driving this. Yes, it's in the back of the car. No, we don't have any training. Okay, I can't help you. Okay, that's going to be tough. That's going to be a tough one to help you on. Yes, sir.
Isn't there typically some type of device that the driver has to have? I forget the name of it.
A dosimeter.
Yeah.
There are film badges. There's other types of dosimeters that monitor how much dose. It's right from the word dose meter. It meters how much exposure your personnel are getting. Generally, that's only required if you're operating in an exempt environment. And usually exempt environments involve what they now call special permits, which is what I got for AirNet, which was a special party status to an exemption that FedEx had, which says we're going to knowingly take a bigger amount of cargo, a larger amount, over 50. We're going to put it closer to our crew, but because we're going to measure them every time we load them and every time we offload them, we're going to monitor the crew's exposure. We're going to train the crew on how to handle and how to distance themselves. We're going to create barriers such as lead shields. If you take the proper precautions, you can have status to that, and then you monitor to make sure they don't go over the 5,000 milligram occupational maximum dose per year.
I've seen the couriers driving in the Vibe, Pontiac Vibe, which I don't know what they're carrying, that much material, have a requirement to wear those cylinders, so I don't.
That would not,
fits in.
yes, that would probably be an internal company, corporation requirement, probably done
From the customer?
for their safety, no, for the courier management.
Okay.
The courier management probably has made a decision, hey, we want to send a message that their exposure is important to us, we're going to monitor it, even though we're going to get nowhere close.
Yeah.
I would recommend it strongly. There's a little bit more cost. Landauer makes those little dosimeter film badges. They're probably $15 a month per employee to monitor them. I don't know, but maybe that's high, maybe it's low, but if it makes your employee feel better and gives them the message that you are committed to the safety, there you go.
And don't they typically have some type of racking system in the back of the vehicle?
Yes, yes. The training program will include all methods of how to secure cargo to make sure it doesn't roll around and turn over on the side. There's orientation arrows to be concerned about. You don't want to put it next to foodstuffs. You don't want to put it next to certain other kinds of cargo. All that's involved in the training. You know, we give them a compatibility exercise to make sure they understand they can't put it near certain things. And there's another thing, you know, like undeveloped film. And but there's other things you can put it in there next to a tennis ball. You can put it in there next to, you know, whatever other cargo. But we'll establish, hey, our other clients ship these materials. Okay, don't put them next to these materials. Or you can put them in the same vehicle, but don't put them within a certain proximity. So there's compatibility issues. You had one more question?
Just to touch on his thing, and I know you can't give me an exact the ROI on that. What are the price points? I mean, you're looking at a specialized. You know, when you have a fleet of guys, there's always a few standouts. The guys that, hey, we're going to go put this guy in here because he's the sharpest tool in the box, so to speak. Sure. So it's more specialized. Right. Now you're putting a driver in their mind list until they get the training to know, maybe in a more riskier environment. Well, you know what? Everything goes up. You want me? You got to pay me more for that. So, I mean, like she said, it's not a $20 liver. It has to be.
Sure.
In your travels with your interaction with the companies, are the price points reasonable enough? I mean, have to be.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you know, this is all negotiable, like anything in business. But, you know, what we can do is get a real handle on what is this costing us to do this.
Right.
And do the math. I mean,
right.
What do we got to get yield to make it work?
Right.
If you're way out of the ballpark, they'll sure let you know.
Right.
And they're certainly not looking to ding you, but neither are they wanting to do bargain basement. I mean, they understand. Shippers understand there is a competency concern here, and they will screen you themselves. Some of them have 5- and 6-page documents that I mean, it's very detailed. You know, how are you going to do this? What if this was occurred? What would you do here? Describe for us your method. Send us a copy of your program.
That's where your training comes in.
They'll critique it. They'll tear it apart. And while my program isn't perfect, I can reasonably assure you that if you're talking to some of these major companies that I showed you, I know who they are, and I've worked with them for years. And if there's something missing that I've missed, they know that we can fix it.
Right.
And it's not without a solution. It's not like we disqualify you because you didn't cross a T. But you know, one of the philosophies that I brought to the carrier that I was at, and we didn't have to do this; it wasn't required, but we screened all the shippers. It doesn't say that in the regulations. It doesn't say that the carrier or transporter has to screen the shipper. But we established a 2-page screening document that said, verify to us that you have trained the people who are going to put it together before they give it to us. And they're going to label it and describe it on the shipping papers and make it available for us to pick up, and it's going to be in a restricted area or not, so that we could filter out the fly-by-night producers from the real legitimate producers.
Right.
And therefore, we lowered our exposure, no pun intended, to dealing with only the premier producers.
Right.
So, and those premier producers are willing to pay you for the competency you bring to the table.
Right.
They understand that this is a cut above.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't lollipops and tennis balls. So, sorry I went so long, but I'll
Not
again,
at all.
if anybody has any other questions, I'm back over here. I'm wide awake now. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.